The Secrets of Middle-earth is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth, where we discuss the hidden themes and deeper layers found in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, whether in his writings or in any of the media derived from them. I'm Thomas Salerno, and joining me today on the panel are Jeff Haecker. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, Thomas.
And perhaps, or maybe just looking at the maps in his copy of the Silmarillion, Pat Mason. Hello,
I'll figure
Pat.
out where we're I'll figure it out. Don't worry.
Be sure to follow along with The Secrets of Middle-earth in Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or any podcast directory or app. And you can find us on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or on X, where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram, where we are at StarQuest Network. And of course, don't forget to get your own official Secrets of Middle-earth merchandise, including our amazing t-shirt, at sqpn.com/merch. It's a great way for you to support our show and to show your love for Tolkien and his wonderful world of Middle-earth. And yes, we are back in the Silmarillion this week for the epic conclusion of Beren and Lúthien. What?
And we're back.
And we're back. Yeah, and I just realized as reading this that I forgot to include a recap for last time. But if you missed last time, why are you here? Go back and listen to the first part of Beren and Lúthien. But yes, where we left Beren is that he was languishing in the dungeons of Sauron on the Isle of Werewolves, Tolin Gaurhoth, and the quest seemed hopeless. Dun, dun,
Finrod,
dun.
Finrod had just died.
Yes.
Finrod, you're my boy, Finrod. You're my boy.
Finrod. You're my boy.
Am I just like dense? Like, what is that from? Is that a meme? Is it
From Old School, the Will Ferrell movie.
Oh,
You're my boy,
okay.
Blue.
You're my
You're
boy,
my
Blue.
boy.
Ah, okay. I need to see more movies, I guess.
I don't necessarily recommend it as a movie to anyone, but if you like Will Ferrell, it's
Very
one.
quotable.
It is very quotable.
as a lot of bad movies are, I'm
Yes.
sure. But actually, and now I feel bad because I don't have my copy of the Silmarillion next to me, but the Beren and Lúthien is very quotable. I mean, like, in the sense that there are some awesome passages in it. But before we dive really deep in, what did you guys think of this second half, and also of Beren and Lúthien, as a whole, but of this second half from, Beren in prison to the end of the quest?
I really like it. I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's because the first part is good too, but it's I think like I said last time, it's almost more in a lot of parts of it. It's more Finrod and Beren, because it's initially Lúthien doesn't go with him on the quest because she's been kind of trapped by her dad and others back in Doriath. So that first part is it's almost more Finrod and Beren, but this part is definitely it's the Beren and Lúthien together, which is in these kind of stories when there's kind of a romance between two characters on a quest, it's always more interesting when they're together. They're always better when they're together, I feel like, and things always usually go, well, I don't want to say always, things usually go better when they're together versus when they're apart. So yeah, this one had a lot of fun elements, a lot of fun bits to it. So yeah, excited to discuss.
What about you, Pat?
It almost feels like two separate stories in a lot of ways. And I would almost argue three separate stories. There's kind of the Finrod and Beren, maybe four. I'm just splitting it up, but you get this sort of, going off on the adventure kind of a thing, and what's important, who's important, and how it gets done. You can tell there was if you've ever read Beren and Lúthien, there's a lot of different versions of this, and it gets pared down to kind of just a real baseline story in the Silmarillion. And so it always leaves me wondering or wanting more. Like, I want more of, what happened and what went on. I like the first time Huon talks, it just says like he gave counsel to Luthien, and you're like, yeah, but what did he say? You want to know what he said. At least
the last time he does too. It's really the second time that he really, like, you actually get what he says in this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you actually get the word. So it leaves you wanting more, but it's well done, I think, as far as sort of an adult fairy tale, kind of how that goes. It's sort of an adventure tale. I don't want to say a pair of star-crossed lovers, because I feel like that maybe doesn't apply, but it sort of does. Doom-crossed lovers.
Does. Yeah.
Doom-crossed lovers.
Doom-crossed lovers.
Doom. Well, it's funny, like, this whole star-crossed thing, the second part, at least in the audiobook version that I was listening to, where I stopped, and then when I picked it up again, opens with Beren languishing in the dungeon, and he's composing a song to the stars after Finrod's death, specifically this constellation in Middle-earth called the Sickle, which is like the 7 stars that represents so it's like star-crossed, but also doom-crossed, because the Sickle is supposed to represent the doom of the Valar upon Morgoth. And then Luthien shows up.
Yeah. And then Luthien.
So yeah, it goes. Luthien has, of course, escaped the halls of Nargothrond with the best dog ever, Huon the Hound, and they arrive at the bridge of Sauron's Isle. Now, I don't know about you guys, but like this is probably, and I don't know why it is, but this is probably my favorite part of the story. Is Luthien taking control of Sauron's Isle, and the episode between Sauron sending all of his guys out one by one to be killed by I don't know why does he send the werewolves out one by one to attack Huon? Why does?
Yeah. Well, you kind of get this feeling that he doesn't know why the wolves aren't coming back. Like, because the last one comes back and says, Huon's out there.
Yeah.
like it's a surprise. Like, he didn't know.
That's literally what he says. Huon is there.
Yeah. So I guess Sauron just saw Luthien and was like, oh, this will be easy. I'll just send a werewolf. Okay, why didn't he come? Okay, I'll just send another one. Okay, I'll just send another one.
I mean, he's got a supply of werewolves. Like, and if he runs out, he'll just go to Werewolves R Us and pick up another one.
So I'm a sorcerer. I can just create some more, I suppose.
I'll just bind another evil spirit to a wolf. It's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, like despite that silliness of like them coming one by one, almost like it's a video game or something. But like this is probably my favorite part. I just love everything about it. I love that Luthien uses song magic as very well. First, to get in touch with Beren, like Beren hears her singing, and then later, of course, she uses magic words and song to destroy the entire island.
Yeah, I love that. Like, he can hear her, like, through the walls in the deepest, darkest dungeon. Mm-hmm. That there is this integral connection between the two of them, because she awakens from her, I don't know what you call it, like captive slumber, and like with the pang of dread that something terrible has happened or is about to happen. She's got to go now. Which is all just, it's the connection they have through, the sort of other side, the spirit world, however you want to put it. It's not, not something they necessarily have in the physical realm. And I really love the fact that she sings through to him, but Sauron hears it and he's like, oh, I can take you out now. I know where you are. And then who wants just wait?
Yeah, he wants to bring her to Morgoth, because he's, of course, Sauron's like, what can I do? What can get me advantage? And he says, and it's funny because, later in the story, she does go to Morgoth and sings to Morgoth. So that's, through a roundabout way, Sauron did, kind of get them to Morgoth, although then Morgoth lost some things that he may not have wanted to lose, but, Sauron did it, in a way. So.
Yeah, and he ends up sending like the very first werewolf to confront them. This guy, Draugluin. Great name. Draugluin. And and
it's gotta be something like Draugluin. Those even words.
Yeah, the elves cleaned that up and made it into something, coherent sounding. Draugluin, when in real life it's probably just like.
I just was looking up the name and I thought it just means blue wolf. I was a little disappointed there. I thought it was going to mean like dread wolf of.
Oh, no, not like Karkaroth's names, which we'll get to a little bit later. His names are pretty amazing. But Draugluin's the guy who faints in front of Sauron and is like, Huon is there. So Sauron's like, he does the Thanos thing where he's like, fine, I'll do it myself. So he goes out, in werewolf shape, because once he realizes it's Huon, he knows that there's this doom that's been put on Huon, I guess by the Valar, they said last time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When he leaves Orome's service, that doom put on him.
That he'll fall to the greatest wolf in Middle Earth. And Sauron's like, well, I'm a shapeshifter, so that could like just be me, right? I'll make myself into the greatest wolf in Middle Earth. And I like how it says, I don't have the book in front of me, but it says something like Sauron goes forth to win the passage of the bridge, which is such a cool line. But of course, he doesn't win the passage of the bridge. And none of his shape-shifting powers helps him. What did you guys think of that fight where you have Sauron like very quickly morphing through his like animorphs or something through his different forms?
Well, it's funny because it starts when he goes across the bridge and to face Luthien. It says she swoons and that his stench is like overpowering, and you almost imagine that's not just a stench of a physical stench. Although I'm sure Tol and Garoth was, they probably didn't have a shower, or much running water there, so it probably doesn't smell great anyway. But especially like a spiritual stench because he's. He's the basically the second worst thing in Middle Earth right now, or in Arda right now, and he probably doesn't smell good to probably the most pure, one of the most pure beings in Arda. So I think it's not just a physical, actual sense of smell, but probably like a spiritual. It's almost like how some saints have said, like the stench of your sin upon your soul is like if you could actually smell what it smelled like, it would overpower because it's so, that's how far it is from kind of the purity that we should be. So I just thought, thought popped in right now, but yeah, that's interesting to think about is like, it's not only the physical, but gazelles kind of have one foot in both realms, the physical and the spiritual. And Sauron is kind of the same, he's a spirit primarily, but is also kind of embodied and, but he can shapeshift and whatnot. And he definitely becomes, more spirit later.
Yeah. I think we get a good glimpse of this in the Rings of Power, in the scene where the one Elven Smith lady accidentally puts on one of the 9 rings, and she goes into the the hidden world, which I've got problems with that because she should already have her foot kind of already in there, but because she's an elf in the first place. But they use the ring to sort of bring her there, and she describes what she sees Sauron, and a lot of it is like stinking death and decay. Like it's a very visceral, smell-induced sort of memory or sensation that she talks about. It's very it kind of focuses in on like the smell of death and decay, and I like that because I think that is probably the sort of overwhelming presence that evil has, especially kind of evil like Sauron.
Right.
Because his name actually does mean, I was trying to pull up what the actual etymology is, but it means something like foul smelling or putrid smelling.
Sauron?
And, you know, like I think so. That's what I'm trying to pull up the.
Abhorrent, yeah, is
corn
what
means corn. Okay, I thought I read something once that it was about like that. It kind of almost meant like smelly or something, or like putrid smelling.
It might be even, yeah. I mean, we know
because he tries to name himself like, you know, great, nice things, but everybody else just calls him Stinky, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, like it's almost like how, you know, like around the bodies of saints, they say there's been like the odor of sanctity. That, you know, there may be, you know, the opposite kind of a odor of perfidy, you know, or something. And I think even some saints have meant, you know, saints who have battled the devil or the supernatural have said that it's like, you know, there's this overpowering stench. And I remember reading in some hagiographies where the devil even appears as a big black dog. So there's definitely that connection as well. Yeah. And just like as the brief tangent, one of my favorite of those stories, though, in the hagiographies, I think it's Anthony of the Desert, where like he hears a knock at his door of his hermitage. He goes to the door, opens it, and there's this guy there, and he's like, "I'm the devil." And Anthony's like, "And? Like, what do you want?" And the devil is he's basically only there to complain about how holy Anthony is and how it really bugs him that he's holy. And I'm like,
you see him like going into this rant and like,
yeah,
you know, he's just slowly closing the door on him. Like, yeah, see you later.
Bye. That's it. It's like C.S. Lewis says, you know, in the opening of the Screw Tape Letters, they can't bear to be mocked. So yeah. I feel like that's why that was in there. But yeah, so and Sauron himself, like, I'm sure like this defeat bugs him for ages after this, that he is defeated by a girl and a dog, you know?
Yeah, a girl. Yeah. You had a whole bunch of like, you know, elven warriors show up at your place, and one of the best of them, and you were able to take them down. You couldn't defeat a small girl and her dog.
And I get that Luthien is also like extra powerful because she has, you know, Maiar blood, and that Huon is a dog who was in the service of one of the Valar. But still, from Sauron's point of view, he's probably just humiliated, you know?
Yeah, because later on in this part, I think there's a part where it might be actually the sons of Feanor who say something about like we were bested by a maiden, or, you know, no one would believe we're bested by a maiden or something. But yeah, just Sauron's the same, as like we were bested by this maiden, and you know, he kind of has that grudge against her family for, you know, the next, you know, 4,000 or 5,000 years until he's defeated. So ultimately.
And it's very Marian imagery, isn't it? Right? You know, like Mary's head on the serpent. At one point, he turns into a snake during this battle.
Yeah, so I think he goes wolf to snake, and then ends up as a vampire.
As a vampire, which in Tolkien's world, I guess just means you're like a giant vampire bat.
That's kind of what it seemed like from the descriptions.
Yeah.
From the two we get in this chapter.
Right. Yeah. We have two vampires. Two vampires.
Two vampires.
One being, funny because this vampire, the first one, when he transforms, I have the book here. It says the blood is dripping from his throat, which is kind of a nice turn, you know, compared to normally it's the other way. But, you know,
yes,
Huon got his, and I think it's a thing, and I'm not super up on my like vampire mythology or whatever, but I think one of the big enemies of vampires are wolves, or are werewolves. So, and Huon is a dog. So, I mean, it's, you know, maybe, I don't know if Tolkien's like pulling from anything there, but I don't know.
I don't know if Tolkien would have been prior to that set of stuff.
In fact, I know in the original Dracula movie, he can like from the Universal, he can also turn into a wolf as well as turning into a bat. So it's almost like vampires and werewolves weren't like, there wasn't like a big distinguishing thing between them. Like it's only, I think, in modern decades that they've become like two separate monsters.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
But I love the yielding scene.
Where
she's
yield your
like,
island to me.
Yeah. Yield your island, or you're gonna have to go back to Morgoth and suffer under him for all eternity.
You're right, with no body, you know. Yeah, that's just so great, you know, and that's just great. Oh, Jeff, did you add that to my script? I almost read that out without.
What?
Almost got you. Okay.
Oh, you put that there. Okay. Yes. Yeah. You can read it if you want, Pat.
Long ago in a distant land, I, Sauron, shape-shifting master of darkness, unleashed an unspeakable evil. But a foolish elven girl with a magic cloak stepped forward to oppose me. Before Huan struck the final stroke, I tore open a portal in time and flung Huan into the future. Sorry, Sauron, that's not what happened. You yielded the island and retreated as a vampire bat.
I'm assuming that's what you're referencing there.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Gotta get back to the Tarangroth. I don't know.
Back to the first stage. Yeah. No, yeah, but I'm sure he would like to rewrite the past so that this didn't happen.
I'm sure he told Morgoth a different story when he got back to.
Oh yeah, you better believe
back
it.
to Angband.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of wonder about that. Like, what was his standing amongst the other Maiar after that point? Because there's a lot of question. Because, you know, when Morgoth goes down, he doesn't really team up with any of the other Balrogs or the other relatively power level Maiar. He kind of strikes out on his own and does his own thing. And,
there's orcs. And then he gets stabbed and becomes Guron. And then, oh, wait.
And that could have happened. I mean, that wasn't a bad thing from that show. There were other problems.
But yeah, it does make you wonder, like, where is Sauron in the actual hierarchy? Is he really the number 2, or does he kind of share that, you know, with Gothmog and Glaurung and some of the other, you know, big time lieutenants, you know?
Yeah.
Because Morgoth may have like a divide and rule kind of thing where he's like, oh, I'll pit all of my very powerful lieutenants against one another so that none of them can overthrow me, and they can never combine to overthrow me because they'll always be too worried about one another.
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it, but Sauron is probably at least the most cunning and intelligent. Because I mean, how smart can a Balrog be? If we're being honest.
At least as how they're portrayed in adaptations, it's just big lumbering monsters. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think he's probably the most intelligent, but you know, and maybe that's why Morgoth kind of keeps him far away so that he doesn't, you know, try to scheme and steal, you know, curry favor amongst Morgoth's underlings to take over. I don't know.
Right, he puts him on this outpost. You stay here on this island, you know, and like it's important. It's really important that you stay here on this island.
He gives him, you know, he says, we'll send you a steady supply of wolves and you can, you know, make them into werewolves. You can have your little experiments and just, you know, he's kind of distracting him with like his hobbies, and so that Morgoth can continue to do his own thing.
Yeah, because it just like the kinslaying follows the elves. You know, Morgoth's betrayal at the hands of Ungoliant follows him. Like he there's no trust, right? He can't, like, even, you know, no honor among thieves, right? Huh. kind of really literal
Little thieves, yeah.
I didn't realize, yeah.
Steals the Silmarils.
Steals the Silmarils, and then she wants to steal them from him, and then he has to call his Balrogs. So then, you know, you wonder about, like, what's churning in the back of his head at that point. I had to get saved by my lieutenants here. How do I keep them from, you know, trying to overthrow me? So there's probably a lot of infighting interplay that goes on that, you know, if Morgoth was able to just get everybody in line, he'd probably storm over the elves, you know, in an instant.
Oh, right. Yeah. I did like the scene of the burial of Finrod. And I had forgotten the mention in the book about how he is re-embodied back in Valinor. So, but, you know, like, well, I mean, we're not going to see, I almost said we haven't seen the last of Finrod. We kind of have in the Silmarillion, but I mean, like, in terms of, you know, Arda, the history of Arda, he does not stay in the halls of Mandos for an extended period of time, probably because of he died a heroic death saving Beren. And that seems to like shave years off your time in the halls of Mandos. And it mentions that, you know, he meets his father, Finarfin, again. So.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that too, but I really like that. I like the concept of him hanging out with his dad.
Yeah.
No, it says he walks beneath the trees of Eldamar with his father.
Mm.
Yeah. Finarfin every once in a while being like, told you should have stayed.
I know, Dad. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's like, yeah.
You could have married the nice elvish girl down the street, but
no.
Well, that was literally the thing, right? He left his beloved behind in Valinor. So I hope they had a nice reunion, or maybe she's just mad that he left. But because I remember that was the explanation why he never marries in Middle Earth, because I believe like his beloved was a Vanyar, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I can't remember one of them that crosses over loses his wife in the Hellcaraxis. And
that's Turgon.
That's true. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Finrod just never marries because he left his beloved back in.
Right. I knew the Turgon thing because I literally just finished reading the longer version of The Fall of Gondolin in the Unfinished Tales, and there's a note that mentions it. Yeah, it's so good. Yeah. But
don't worry,
like,
folks, 6 or 7 years from now we'll get there.
Yeah, we will get there. Yeah.
Yeah. Amari.
But meanwhile, back
her
in
name.
What's that?
Amarie was her name. She's a Vanyarn elf who did not fall into Middle Earth. But
nice.
They were betrothed, but Finrod never married while there. And it says, I'm just pulling off of one of the wikis. It says in the Lay of Luthien, Finrod was allowed to return to life in Valinor and now dwells with Amarie. So, at least according to that, he gets that happy ever after.
Happily, yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, everybody else has to stick it out in Middle Earth and keep on fighting, I guess. Like
to suffer and suffer and suffer.
But meanwhile, and like, I wish we had those like transitions from like the 60s Batman show, you know, like, where because like, meanwhile, in Nargothrond, Celebrimbor and no, not Celebrimbor, he comes later. But anyway, the sons of Feanor with Celegorm and Curufin, that's them, have been cast out of the city. Celebrimbor, who's actually Curufin's son, I think this is the first mention of him in the Silmarillion. He stays behind. He disowns his father and stays behind. But the two brothers, like the people of Nargothrond, finally get a clue and kick these two troublemakers out. Yeah.
After all the people come back from Tol and Gura, they're like, yeah, you guys were so wussy you couldn't come help.
Right, yeah, because there were a bunch of other prisoners who get released. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe that's where the maiden thing comes from, where they were...
Yeah.
They said they're, you know, a maiden went where a hero would not, or whatever. Yeah. Or where you know, an elf warrior would not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
for some reason, Huan goes back to them, I guess, just out of, misplaced loyalty.
He's a dog. I mean,
yeah, he is a dog.
Gotta be tough to break that.
Mm-hmm.
But he does later. He kind of fully breaks with them when he realizes that they're not good.
Yeah, right.
Right, because they encounter Beren and Lúthien on the edge of the forest, on the edge of Doriath, and Huan finally decides to turn on his masters. There's some interesting details in here. I like how they make a big deal out of, one of the brothers scoops Lúthien up and rides off with her, or attempts to, and Beren makes this huge leap, and they make such a big deal out of it. I love that.
Yeah, it's like a leap that will forever be talked about between elves and men.
Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah. The leap of Beren is renowned among both elves and men. And I'm like, oh.
Okay.
It's like that high school football star who, won the big game 30 years ago.
And they still talk about
it. Everyone
it.
still talks about it.
But and another neat detail is that we have the first appearance of the knife Angrist. Beren takes it from Curufin because he tackles him off his horse essentially and starts throttling him. Takes the knife. An interesting detail: this knife was made by Telkar, the dwarven smith, who is the same dwarf who made both the dragon helm of Dor-Lomin, which we'll see in a few episodes from now in the story of Turin. And Telkar also made Narsil, the sword which will eventually become Andúril, Flame of the West. So Telkar's probably the greatest dwarven smith who ever lived. He made 3 legendary items.
Yeah, it's pretty solid.
When you essentially make Excalibur and a magic helmet and a magic knife that is going to come in handy later. So it's yeah. And I think they said something that his items were used by members of all 3 of the kindreds of the Edain. I'd have to look up to see if that's actually accurate, but I have heard somewhere that who is it? Beren, Turin, and I forget who the original wielder of Narsil was, but that apparently it's all the 3 houses of the Edain have used a weapon made by this guy. So that's pretty cool.
Eventually, Elendil has Narsil. I don't know if there's. I thought, at least from what I'm remembering, that there wasn't there wasn't really discussed on its backstory aside from it was forged by Telkar, and then eventually it was it was an heirloom of Elendil's house.
Right.
Which maybe we'll get some more in the show, because if I'm remembering, I think at the end of season 2, Tarmiriel gives Narsil to Elendil.
Yeah.
Yes. So obviously it was in her possession the whole time. It was never Elendil's own sword. Breaking the canon again.
Yeah.
Now I've heard that it might have come from Menegroth. That it was because Thingol seems to have a lot of swords. I know his own sword is Ringil, I think, but he had several other swords, so it might have been one of his or one of his lieutenants' swords. At the very, very least, it was a famous blade. But oh yes, and but before we get too far afield, Beren takes an arrow for a Luthien that's meant for a Luthien that the brothers shoot at her, and
parting shot.
Right, yeah, literal parting shot. Huan catches the first one, but the second one Beren takes, and Huan brings a mysterious herb that heals Beren, and I'm like, that's got to be Kingsfoil, right?
Like a weed.
Yeah. It's got to be.
It's got to be Kingsfoil. Yeah. There's not just it's not just some random healing herb. This is Middle Earth. It's got to be. Yeah.
I wonder about this scene. Like from a purpose perspective, this is how Huan changes loyalties, right? and this is why he ends up going with Beren and Lúthien after this point. But I often feel like there's got to be some story behind the reason this scene exists. Something that happened in Tolkien's life, or something, with him and his wife and a couple of ruffians or something, and then Tolkien leapt to her defense or something. It just has that sort of like author's stamp on it, the feeling. Because other than like explaining, Huon or why he's with them, and also kind of, further impressing upon the reader how terrible Celegorn and Curufin are. There's not a whole lot of purpose to the scene. And just to say that they randomly ran into each other in the wilds north of Doriath is just sort of like, that's a lot of space there.
Yeah, it's very convenient. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah. I wonder what, and Tolkien could be a very private person, so I'm sure everything that happened is not recorded, but yeah, at this point, Beren and Lúthien have kind of this disagreement because Beren wants to, he feels the weight of his doom, right? He feels the weight of the quest, and he knows he can't return to Doriath empty-handed. And Lúthien basically tells him, like, look, I'm not leaving your side. You could basically complete the quest, or we can essentially wander as exiles forever. Either way, I'm in it for the long haul. And Beren's like, I don't want to endanger my love, so I'm going to leave you while you're asleep.
Yeah.
and run off to complete the quest. But that doesn't work because Lúthien and Huon follow him again, and are able to disguise. This is gross. They're able to disguise themselves in the skins of two monsters that were killed at Sauron's Isle.
I've always wondered at this scene, like, because it talks about her, because Lúthien dons the skin or whatever of Thuringwethil, this like bat creature, and it mentions that she's flying and flittering. So I'm always wondering, like, is she actually, like, can she use this thing to fly around? And or is it just like is it just being allegorical or whatever
poetic
here? Or yeah. So I like to think that she is like turning into a bat creature, like or is disguised as a bat creature, can actually fly around too. And that makes me think, like, you should have used this more often if you could fly around.
Yeah.
Could be handy, but
yeah. I have to assume that she is flying around, like she like some sort of skinwalker ability, where she's donning it and she gains its powers or something, because like it doesn't make any sense. Like, if you see orcs or whatever else on your way to Thangarodrim, like the bat's walking on the ground, that's odd. Like, I'm gonna go check that out. Like it feels like it would call attention.
I feel like it's got to be the same power that Finrod had when they dress themselves in the orcs' clothes, and then he's able to make them look just like orcs.
Yeah.
I feel like it's got to be like that.
It does say she like flitters and flies, so I don't know.
And Beren takes the form specifically of Draugluin.
Yeah.
Of that one werewolf, which will become important in a minute, because they reach Angband, and who's the door ward but an even bigger werewolf, Karkaroth. The creation scene that they kind of do a little flashback to Karkaroth's creation. That was unsettling and disturbing. Where, like Morgoth is just like hand feeding him like, raw meat and stuff, and making him grow and make my monster grow. Like it's Power Rangers or something, but
yeah.
But yeah, Karkaroth, that name means the Red Maw, which is a cool name. And he's got another name, which means the Jaws of Thirst, which is totally not disturbing. And like all the other werewolves, he's a devouring spirit in wolf's shape. And he's immediately suspicious of these two because he's heard that Draugluin is dead.
Yeah.
And he's like, wait, so now he's alive? What happened, bro?
What's going on here?
But of course, Luthien uses her sleep spell
Yeah.
with her cloak and is able to put Karkaroff to sleep. Poor boy.
Well, that one's like that's like a really direct version of, because she just like sort of, as he comes on her, she just sort of like unmasks herself and just gives him the command.
Right.
Like sleep.
Yeah.
Like, and it very much is, I feel like sort of through these chapters, we see her kind of channeling Melian's power.
They say that explicitly at this point, that's what she's doing. Yeah.
This is sort of, because I assume Melian's like one of the nature spirits, right? Or
I think so.
And so she sort of has these different abilities because of who her mom is.
And then we have, you can't have any good myth without the descent into the underworld, the descent into hell. And in this case, kind of literally descent into hell to confront the devil. And they go to the deepest, darkest chamber, Morgoth's throne room, which nobody's ever made it to. Whole armies, kings and princes, nobody's made it this far except these two, doom-crossed lovers here.
Yeah. I mean, heck, nobody's even made it past the gate.
The gate.
Even through the gate.
Right, except people who have been captured, and you don't want to be that, and then there's this awful, creepy thing where they're like, because Luthien is unmasked before Morgoth, and it says Morgoth starts having these, like, lustful thoughts about her. I'm like, great, terrific. Like, it's just unsettling. Thank you.
Yeah.
But Luthien is able to weave her song of sleep, which even overcomes Morgoth himself. I like the description of him falling from his throne. They say like a hill sliding in an avalanche off his throne. That was great.
Yep.
And there we have the appearance again of the knife that Telkar made. Because Beren somehow evades detection. I don't know if I missed something, but he
he sort of like slinks, along the ground. I guess.
Is he still wearing the skin of
I think so.
It just goes under more.
I mean, that thing probably doesn't smell great. So I mean, it's probably an Angband probably doesn't smell great. So I mean, you're probably, and I mean, like you said, there's probably, similar to what Finrod did, but Luthien's kind of casting that, kind of illusion spell as well to kind of hide them.
It almost reminds me of in an earlier draft of the Beren and Lúthien story, the one where Sauron's a cat and the Luthien comes before him after meeting Huan, and Sauron cat is just like, you smell of dog. And so I'm sure at this point Beren smells of dog, or at least wolf anyway.
Yeah. Terrible werewolf smell. I like how he's not immune to the sleeping song either.
Yeah.
Like he goes down to everybody in the chamber.
Just to wake him up like, hey, get up. We got to do the thing now.
Gotta go now.
This is why we're here. Let's go. And so, he takes the knife of Telkar and cuts a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth. But then he gets a little bit greedy. I'm like, maybe I could take all three.
Well, we forgot to mention earlier, the knife can cut through metal. Like it says, it cuts through metal like it's a green tree or a green sapling or something like that. So the knife definitely has that, that magic power, that dwarvish power. That's why it can cut through the crown in order to get the Silmaril. But it doesn't quite cut, it doesn't quite last after cutting the crown.
No, it's like a Breath of the Wild weapon. The more you use it, it eventually breaks, and so it breaks while he's trying to get the second Silmaril from its setting, and it nicks. I believe it nicks Morgoth's face.
Yes,
it's cheek.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's another wound that he has. He keeps getting injured throughout.
Yeah.
And probably to him, this is the one that's the most bitter, even though it's not the most, it didn't leave the biggest scar, But yeah, they realize, I'm sorry, Pat, go ahead.
Well, I do wonder which one he took, right? I don't think it says.
Oh, yeah.
Because you figure 3 of them, you'd set them like in a row or some kind of row-like setting where you've got one in the middle, and that's probably a little more, I don't know, flashily displayed, and 2 on the sides. Like, did he take one of the side ones? Did he take the middle one? Like, how does Morgoth feel about his crown after this point? Like what is, and again, what do his generals think about him? And he keeps losing face in front of them, because before this he has the whole duel, which of course he wins, but he takes those 7 wounds and the limp he's got now. That's always with him, that everybody doesn't talk about, except probably behind his back.
Right. And he got the scars across his face from Thorondor.
Eagles.
Yeah. And I remember there's this idea that Morgoth is slowly sort of losing his angelic power as he continues to remain in a body, and as he continues to put a lot of his power into his creatures that he makes. It's like he's becoming less and less like what the Valar are. So even though he starts out in the Ainulindale as the most powerful of them, he's now he's still far above what any man or elf is going to be, or even like your average Maiar. But he's become diminished. He's almost like Sauron when he puts all of his, life force, or most of it, into the one ring. He's become almost like a shadow of himself by doing this.
And he probably, just from losing his kind of connection to Eru Ilúvatar too, he's probably lost, I'm sure because Eru Ilúvatar sustains everything. So if you're going against Ilúvatar, then especially when you're as powerful as a Valar, it's possible that he's lost some of his power from that too, that he's not getting sustained as well as all the other Valar are.
Yeah, and I think it speaks a lot to this concept of becoming overly attached to the things of this world, right? So he's overly attached to power and control. He wants Arda for himself, so he puts forth all of his effort and his will into that. And because of that, he's sort of chaining himself to Arda. And while Arda and the tale and the stories are all a good thing, he's over attaching himself and causing it to be a bad thing. He's going too far in his, want or desire or will for control. And we kind of see that play out in different ways, depending on, the time frame. You have the pre, even the pre-lamp age, where he's just the roving mountain. He's just, knocking over mountains and raising up valleys and just, causing things to go bad. But you see in every age, he finds a way to try and control it, and then in a tantrum say, well, if I can't have it, nobody can, sort of a thing. But he's ultimately chained himself to something that is a good, but isn't something you should chain yourself to.
Right.
He loves the creature more than the creator.
Right.
Yeah.
He doesn't love the creator at all, really, at this point.
Yeah. So instead of, I think Tolkien always loved the concept of subcreation, or that, one of the real ways in which we embody our creator or are made in the image and likeness of God is in our ability to create. we are made by a maker. And so through that, we can make. And that's, I think, the dwarves are probably the best example of that. They're literally made by a smith god. And what can they do? Amazing smith work. That's an expression of that conceptually. And Morgoth is sort of more or less eschewed that. He's no longer working to make things with Eru Ilúvatar, and the things he does make are the things that Eru, of his deeds, despises the most. Mm-hmm. Because they're just these marred, through a glass darkly versions of things that are good and pure and wholesome.
Right, because he has no genuine creativity. He can only create counterfeits. And he's become basically a prisoner in Angband. He doesn't leave. He's got his limp and he doesn't want to risk any further injury. So even though he's presumably the most powerful being, in Middle Earth, he's still a prisoner of his own making.
Yeah.
But Beren and Lúthien do not want to be prisoners, so they flee pretty fast out of this situation and come face to face with Carcharoth at the gate. He's awake, and it's funny, it's interesting when they grab the Silmaril. Now, it's been mentioned earlier that the Silmaril will not bear contact with impure flesh, with evil, and so when Beren grasps it, it allows him to do that without harming him.
He can pick up Thor's hammer.
Yes, yeah, he is worthy. Beren is worthy. I knew it. It's like
you knew it.
Beren is worthy, but loses his hand and the Silmaril to Carcharoth because Carcharoth lunges at them and just clamps down his huge wolf jaws, and so we finally get Beren one hand. As actually mentioned in the Lord of the Rings, I remember Sam mentioning having heard this story, and he's like, "Remember, Mr. Frodo, when we heard the tale of Beren One Hand and the Great Jewel?" Well, it's like, this is what I love about telling people to read the Silmarillion after having read the Lord of the Rings, because then you'll get all those great references in the Lord of the Rings. But since Carcharoth is not pure of heart, obviously, he swallows the Silmarillion and immediately begins to torment him. And so then he just literally runs off howling. And we'll come back to him later. But
yeah, I mean it's cooking him from the inside, basically, as we'll find out.
I like what it says. No, nothing Morgoth unleashed from the north was more terrifying than Carcharoth's rampage. And you're like, that's a bold statement, because there's some stuff coming. Glaurog's coming. Mm-hmm. There's a couple other, the waves and waves of orcs. Sauron, he came down from the north,
Balrogs.
Carcharoth is the worst of it. Just rampaging randomly through the north, just of Beleriand.
maybe it's the worst because there's no direction to it. It's just random violence. Is where when he would send out one of his lieutenants or send out Glaurung or one of the Balrogs to destroy a city or kill somebody, it at least has a direction.
Yeah.
With this, he's just killing everyone he meets, and destroying everything needlessly.
So good. You let loose the psychopathic giant Fenris wolf. Good job.
Yeah.
Oh, goody.
Yeah. He could eat Cujo for breakfast, basically, is what we're saying here. So,
yeah.
But Beren and Lúthien end up being saved by Thorondor and the Great Eagles. And I thought it mentioned this in the Silmarillion version, but I don't think it did. This must be in one of the earlier iterations of this story, because when the eagles fly them over the mountains, Lúthien can see Gondolin down on the ground there. She can see the gleam of the city. And in one version I read, the tears because she thinks Beren is going to die. and that the tears she sheds for Beren fall on the plain of Gondolin and create a magic healing spring there. But that detail was not in the Silmarillion version.
No, it wasn't.
So I don't know which version that exists in, but it's got to be somewhere because I remember it, unless it's the Mandela effect. And this is not your normal Thomas, but a new one who's popped in from another timeline where that detail is in the Silmarillion. But
I think you mean the Mandala effect.
What?
That's part of it. It's called the Mandela effect, but then there's confusion if it's also called the Mandala effect.
It'd be the Mancala effect. I love that game. The stones you moved around.
I think I've eaten at Mandala once before. It's pretty
good. Good old Deus Ex Machina Eagles. Whenever you need a saving, call Deus Ex Machina Eagles.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're much more reliable than, your average Deus Ex Machina.
Yes. Guaranteed to show up when you need them or else. Or else what? Well,
Or else you're dead. Basically,
Yeah,
I was gonna say you'd get a refund, and I'm like, but what? Yeah,
I think it would be a Deus Ex Aquile, because Aquile is eagle in Latin.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So DEA. Okay.
But meanwhile, Karkaroth is rampaging through the lands, but Beren and Lúthien return to Menegroth and tell their tale before Thingol and Melian. Because Beren says, I have a Silmaril within my hand. Thingol's like, show it to me. And of course, Beren, he still has his left hand, he opens it and then shows forth his right hand, which is obviously a stump. And this is what finally gets Thingol on side. So
he asked for Lúthien's hand in marriage, and he gave his hand in return. So
hand for a hand, I guess. Yeah. I suppose, yeah. Because it does mention that Lúthien and Beren put hand in hand. They're betrothed before the throne. Yeah. And I like that the detail where it mentions that Thingol says that he sees that Beren is among the great in Arda, and that he has like this doom that's going to affect generations and ages later. He kind of gets a little bit of foresight, which is neat.
Yeah.
And Melian's just like, told you so.
Yep.
Told you so.
Just coming from over the. It was like, you listen really closely at night. You can hear.
You can hear. Man, yeah. So they decide to go out and hunt the great wolf Karkaroth. Thingol's exterminating or animal control service. And you have the final confrontation because Karkaroth is the prophesied greatest werewolf that will fight the greatest wolfhound of all time, Huan. And really? Huan's gotta die? Why?
It was his doom.
Yeah, it was his doom. Yeah, he dies saving Beren's life. And yeah, you were right, Jeff. Like they just said, he said some last words to Beren, but we don't get to know what those are. And I'm like, what?
Yeah. Just the second words, like the second time he talks. That's the one we get.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so both Beren and Huan are wounded to the death in this final fight because Karkaroth, even though Huan tries to protect Beren, Karkaroth essentially like gashes Beren's chest open. At least that's the reading I took for it. And I've seen fan art to that effect. But and I like that one elf, Moblung, he cuts the Silmaril out of the dead body of the wolf. And they said like it's basically consumed all of Karkaroth's internal organs. Yeah. I'm like, he's gonna die anyway. I'm like,
But I like that Beren's hand is still intact.
Yeah,
Like,
they say it's
the Silmaril's
incorrupt.
touching it. When they pull the Silmaril from it, that's when it dissolves. But
It dissolves,
yeah. And I like that Bereg's there too, or Beleg, sorry. Beleg's there too.
Oh, Beleg
this is-
Strongbow.
Yeah, this is the first introduction you get for him.
Mm.
He gets to play through from this point onward. I often I wonder how much of him and Turin's friendship is sort of started here, like when he recognizes the strength of men and
Mm-hmm.
you know how their fates are really intertwined with the elder children.
Thingol definitely softens towards men after this point, and is why he'll eventually foster Turin, like in his own house.
And it was interesting, for some foreshadowing there of how Beren's hand is not burned by holding the Silmar. Even after it's been severed, it's not burned. But there will be another hand later that does get burned. That we'll come to know in a few chapters.
Yeah. It just goes to show you can't do anything important in Middle Earth without somebody losing some body part.
Middle Earth and Star Wars, somebody always has to lose a hand.
Lose a hand, yeah.
I mean, Frodo got away with just a finger.
Just a finger.
Like,
Frodo of the 9 fingers and the Ring of Doom. Yeah.
You gotta feel like ratio wise for Frodo's weight, a finger would probably be equivalent to a man's hand.
I also wondered, this is again another tangent, but it never says which finger Frodo loses. Can you imagine if you lost your index finger? That would make everything so inconvenient.
That's why he really wants to go to Valinor. He's like, I can't use my pointer finger anymore. I'm tired of that.
Imagine if it was the thumb.
Yeah, then you're really out of luck.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume it's the ring finger just because, it's the ring. He was wearing the ring when Gollum bites it off of him. So
it's just like in the movies, they have this tendency to always have Frodo put it on the index finger, except the moment at Mount Doom when he puts it on the ring finger. But
yeah, I guess he normally does put it on the index finger.
Yeah, I remember they do that several times. But yeah, so I like how they give the Silmaril to Beren, who can then give it to Thingol, and then basically say the quest is achieved. And it's like, man, at what cost? Thingol's probably thinking to himself, yeah, I done messed up.
Yeah.
You done messed up, Thingol.
I sent this poor kid to his death.
Would it be Thingol? It'd be
Thingol.
Thingol. You done messed up, Aaron.
But yeah, before they part, though, Luthien bids Beren await her beyond the sea. Luthien dies of grief, and she comes to the halls of Mandos and is able to move Mandos to pity with her music, where it says he was never moved like that before, and he never will be again.
Yeah.
One-time deal.
You gotta figure, he's probably heard it all too, because he's effectively in at least in this role, he is sort of the embodiment of death, right? And there's plenty of elves who are probably showing up there being like, it wasn't my time, or it was too early, or this thing was about to happen, and please send me back. Da, 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 da. He's probably like, nope. Get in the hall.
He has a big rubber stamp that says Doom and stamps your paper and
stamps your forehead. Doom.
So,
next.
King Yama in Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, yeah.
Just show up after you die, processing your form, stamp, on you go.
Yeah.
And I like that Beren sort of sticks around there. That, because they both ply, like Beren plies Mandos. He's like, no, I'm not leaving until I get to see her.
Right, yeah. And then they mention that, like, there's this outer sea thing that men set out on, and they're never seen again. So, presumably they leave the confines of Arda.
Yeah, we finally get this sort of setup for how it works for men. Because before this, like, we just know, they die, right?
Mm-hmm.
The gift of Iluvatar, we didn't really know the mechanics of it. So they do end up going to the halls of Mandos.
Mm-hmm.
There is sort of this, Sheol, Hades kind of feel to things where they go there and then they're with him for a short time and then they depart.
Right.
And then the elves all, I don't know, what do they wave from the dock? Bye, see you later.
Theonor's over there in the corner, just waiting for everyone else to be re-embodied.
Yeah.
Before he gets to.
I don't know how angry he is that, this mortal man ended up getting one of the Silmarils. He didn't even get to the gates.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that, Mando's probably now Feanor, play nice,
Yeah.
We don't want to have to go through this all again. And I like that it's not up to Mandos either. He's got to go to Manwë, who then has to go to Iluvatar to get permission to make this huge exception to how the rules of mortality normally work. And that makes total sense. Like, mortality is put in place, by God. The Valar can't do anything about it, They literally have to get kind of divine edict to make this exception. It's really Iluvatar who makes the exception.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of the movie with George Bailey. A Wonderful Life. Yeah, It's a Wonderful Life, where Clarence gets permission to make him not exist, and it's like this whole big deal. Like he's got to go up the chain to get it done, and there's a lot of anger about it.
I want to live, Mandos. I want to live.
Yeah.
Every time a bell rings, a Mire gets its wing.
But yeah, no, Beren and Lúthien are restored to life, but Lúthien has to make a choice. Because, she can either, do the normal thing that elves do and get re-embodied and live in bliss in Valinor, but then she'll be parted from Beren. Or they can both become re-embodied, but she will have to give up immortality, or the elvish version of immortality, and become mortal. And if that sounds familiar, it's because this same essential storyline will be repeated ages and ages later with Aragorn and Arwen along similar lines, where she gives up elvish immortality, to be with Aragorn. So as George Lucas would say, his poetry arrives.
You beat me to it, I was about to say.
Oh!
Yeah, it's interesting because this is the first. I mean, this is the start of the house of, or the two kindreds having coming together in that way, and then it's ultimately fulfilled in Aragorn and Arwen because obviously Aragorn is descended from Elros, who was the son of a half-elven or of someone who became allowed to be counted among the immortals, and Elros chose to be mortal, whereas Elrond chose to be immortal, to be counted among the elves. But then Aragorn and Arwen are there, kind of reuniting of those two parts of the house of Elendil, or the house of not Elendil, but a house of Beren and Lúthien.
Yeah, because they mention how, because of this, because of the choice of Lúthien, you have the blending of the two kindreds of men and elves. And it's almost like that was despite all this suffering, despite everything they had to go through, it was so that men could be ennobled with the blood of not only elves, but also Maiar. So you have this great, and it's all part of the plan of Iluvatar to ennoble men.
Iluvatar says, I love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah. That reminds me, like that could be another like whole episode discussion is like fate and free will in Middle Earth. Because obviously Tolkien believes in free will because he's Catholic. But there's also this very interesting strain of fate and doom that kind of goes through the whole thing, clearly influenced by the Norse, where it's almost like some people are just fated to make certain choices, but they're free choices. I guess you could say it's almost like Our Lady at the Annunciation, right? She's completely free to say yes or no, but she's going to say yes because her will, at least according to some theologians, she's going to say yes because her will is aligned with God's will. I am the handmaid of the Lord. So, but yeah, it would be an interesting discussion. Got to put a pin in that for the future. Fate and free will in Middle Earth.
Yeah, that would be, because you kind of get this choice here, which was a choice by Luthien, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the next person we're going to read about, Turin, he just, he's just fated to lose. Basically, it's sort of like written in the stars or doomed or however you want to put it. But I do like the interplay. In this story, you have the knife, right, that is supposed to be able to cut through iron like butter. It gets one Silmarillion out pretty easily and goes for another, and it shatters. It breaks and cuts Morgoth and raises the alarm. So there is this strain, and it says very literally the other two Silmarils' dooms were different. And so there is this interplay between personal choice and doom.
Yeah, because like you said, there's the doom kind of tells you what's going to happen, but Thingol could have not sent Beren on a quest to get a Silmaril, but he was going to, no matter what. So he still made that choice and freedom. But Mandos and others knew what was going to happen just because you assume they have some kind of perfect vision or vision of their will or something to know exactly what they would do in that kind of situation. So
yeah, that brings us to the end of the greatest love story ever told in Middle Earth, and one of the linchpin tales of the Silmarillion. It's almost like the entire Silmarillion kind of, its axis is around Beren and Lúthien, right? It's at about the midpoint. And like at least in my copy of the book. And it's like, so like, what do you guys think of Beren and Lúthien? I feel like Beren and Lúthien is really the beating heart of the Silmarillion.
Yeah, I think so. And Thomas, I do have to disagree with you. The greatest love story is between Tauriel and Killy from the Hobbit movies. So there's our contractual reference. So.
There's our contractual reference. The check is in the mail. There
it is. Oh. Well done, Jeff. Well done.
Well played, sir.
Hey, I'm trying to get us paid, guys. Trying to get us paid.
I didn't even see that coming.
We do not get paid.
That's what the monster said. About $350.
The look on your face, Pat, was priceless when you realized what was happening.
It took me a minute.
We've been going for a while and we're devolving into that. But in all seriousness, I do agree, Thomas. Yeah, it really is kind of it's the heart of really the story of the rest of Lord of the Rings, of the rest of the Legendarium, because like we were saying, this kind of sets up what ultimately will happen in Return of the King with Aragorn and Arwen coming together to, like we said, Melian kind of entered into the world to, kind of almost like, like we were talking about the Virgin Mary, almost similar in that way. Like she entered into the world in order to kind of start this bloodline of giving that divine blood into, entering it, giving that divine blood into the elven bloodline, and then giving that, mingling that with men through Beren and Lúthien, all the way to, ultimately become the stewards of Arda, to kind of give them that, that, like you said, they had a noblement to help them to lead Arda and to become the stewards once the elves leave. So yeah, I mean, I think I do agree with that it really is kind of the heart of, of the book and of this story and of the Legendarium. So
yeah, it's kind of like I think I would liken it to it would be like the spinning center around which everything orbits. And if you take that imagery with, like the first stage, Beren and Lúthien being this sort of axis upon which everything is sort of rotating around, and then you move that forward in time, it becomes kind of like a spiral. And I sort of envision it as kind of like a spiral staircase upon which all of these figures who are important to the, effectively the salvation of the free peoples of Middle Earth are on this, this spiral staircase, and everything is sort of revolving around it as it moves forward in time, to all the way you get to, the end of the Lord of the Rings with, and their names just went out of my head. Good job. Aragorn and Arwen.
Yeah.
And so you have this sort of unbroken line between the two that is sort of setting up in each age and in each scenario a way forward for the free peoples. And it sort of becomes, I think Tolkien envisioned, all of it as one big thing, right? It was as the tale of the jewels and the rings. And you have it sort of play out over the three ages of Middle Earth through this or around this axis created, really the foundation stone is Melian and Thingol, but really gets its start, gets really its head of steam going with Beren and Lúthien.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, I like that image of the spiral staircase. That's nice. Yeah. Yeah, and how we can see its sort of ripple effects throughout the entire history of the Legendarium. And I think the way it all comes together in the published Silmarillion is just great. You've got to thank Christopher for all his hard work of going through all his father's papers and selecting, the versions of these stories that, best fit, with what he felt, could give us kind of a coherent mythology in the published Silmarillion. But yeah, I really think that Beren and Lúthien is a good enough, as you've been describing it, Pat, a fairy tale, that it can also just kind of like mostly stand on its own. I mean, I know there's a bit of backstory that would take some explaining, but like the Silmarils and stuff, but you could do that in like a reasonable amount of space. And I mean, like, it is its own book, actually. You can get the book Beren and Lúthien, which contains the different iterations, different versions of the tale, where you can see Cat Sauron. I'm forgetting his
Tevildo.
Tevildo, that's it.
Prince of
Tevildo,
Cats.
Prince of Cats.
Yep.
And Huon talks a lot more, which is great.
You get a much longer version of the Lay of Lúthien. We basically get 3 passages in here.
Right.
And in Beren and Lúthien, you get pretty much everything Tolkien wrote, which was not the entire story, but was large sections of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the sections that are in verse are actually a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like those parts. And as I've said before, it was really like through reading Tolkien's verses that really sort of heightened my appreciation for poetry in general. So got to thank the professor for that. But But yeah, and any other final thoughts about Beren and Lúthien before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I'm glad we got a happy ending here before we have a lot of sadness.
Yes.
In the next
So
section.
the next few episodes of the Silmarillion march through will be lots of sadness.
Oh, come on. You guys can't be a little more cautiously optimistic about the future.
Well, I mean, like the next thing up is called the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. So I'm not sure how cautiously optimistic I can be about something called that. I'm cautiously optimistic that it will be depressing, but
Epically depressing.
Epically
It's
depressing.
pretty epic, though.
Yeah. Despair.
But until then, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make our show possible, including Treese G, Chasidi E, Chris K, Walter G, and Daniel W. Their generous donations help us to continue to create the Secrets of Middle-earth and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them at sqpn.com/give. And we'd also love to hear from all our listeners. What do you think about Beren and Lúthien, and of course the entire Silmarillion? You can let us know on our Facebook page, on X. You can send us an email to middleearth@sqpn.com. You can leave a comment on YouTube or visit our channel on the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. And join us next time for our 3rd annual Tolkien Reading Day special, focusing on the theme of fellowship and community. Until then, thank you, Jeff, for joining me and sharing the secrets of Middle-earth.
Thanks, Thomas.
And Pat, thank you as well.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
And once again, I'm Thomas Salerno. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Middle-earth on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy, The Catholics of Oz. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Oz.